evening. I'm Rebecca Jarvis.
And I'm Jerry Bowyer. Welcome to the Kudlow Report. Larry Kudlow has the day off.
On tonight's show, an assault on market optimism, weak economic data, more big government takeovers, and threats of terrorism and swine flu all weighed on stocks today as the Dow lost 130 points. The question is, how secure is the economy and the market, and how do you play it? We're going to debate.
Plus, too big to fail? Treasury may inject $7 billion into GMAC, making gangster government the majority shareholder. Is this just more government command and control of the economy?
And a mainstay here on the program, Bailout Nation credit card legislation is headed to the president's desk. But are the new rules good or bad for business? And what about the consumer?
Plus, a breaking news announcement from AIG as CEO Edward Liddy told the board he plans to step down. We'll have the latest.
But first up, and today, President Obama and former Vice President Cheney are dueling over national security. CNBC Chief Washington Correspondent John Harwood has the latest. Hi, John.
Hey, Rebecca. You know, what you had today was really the distillation in a large measure of the national security argument that's taken place ever since Barack Obama took office. He's reversed a lot of the policies of the last 8 years. And what he said today to an audience at the National Archives was that he set out to strike a better balance between security and American values.
The American people are not absolutist, and they don't elect us to impose a rigid ideology on our problems. They know that we need not sacrifice our security for our values, nor sacrifice our values for our security, so long as we approach difficult questions with honesty and care and a dose of common sense. That, after all, is the unique genius of America. That's the challenge laid down by our Constitution.
Now, the president went on to spell out what that means for the closure of Guantanamo, for the future of enhanced interrogation techniques, which he has outlawed, for the treatment of detainees and how long they can be treated, where they can be treated, including some in the U.S. But he was rebutted after that by former Vice President Dick Cheney, who, of course, was the architect of many of those policies over the last 8 years. What Dick Cheney said was, on national security, there is no balance to strike.
In the fight against terrorism, there is no middle ground, and half measures keep you half exposed. You cannot keep just some nuclear-armed terrorist out of the United States. You must keep every nuclear-armed terrorist out of the United States. Triangulation is a political strategy, not a national security strategy. When just a single clue that goes unlearned or one lead that goes unpursued can bring on catastrophe, it's no time for splitting differences.
Very tough words from the former Vice President. Rebecca, this argument's going to go on, and even though Vice President Cheney is not popular at all, and President Obama is very popular, I think some Republicans are quietly happy that he's making that argument because it puts on the table the issue of what happens if we do get struck again during the Obama years, and Republicans can say, we told you so.
John, this is Jerry Bowyer. One of the things I was wondering about your coverage of this is there's a lot of politics to this, and we can talk about who wins and who loses. But just as an observer, I wonder your reaction to sort of the quality of the debate, because this doesn't look like sort of your typical kind of contest of wills in Washington. These are two very intelligent men making a cogent case. How do you view this?
Well, there's no question that they're smart guys who are making a cogent case. Vice President Cheney deeply believes the argument that he's making. It is an unpopular argument, but it's one informed by his service as Secretary of Defense, of course, and as Vice President for the last 8 years. He talked about being influenced by the 9/11 attacks. And Barack Obama is coming from a different place on the spectrum and simply making the argument that, A, Dick Cheney is wrong, and B, he was judged wrong by President Bush during his second term when, of course, some of those national security close calls started going in the way that Condoleezza Rice, for example, wanted rather than Vice President Cheney. So part of the response from the White House is going to be Dick Cheney's arguing with his past colleagues in the administration as well as with the current occupant of the White House.
John, I wonder, as this debate continues to unfold, whether this idea of an ad hoc legal approach, the one that President Obama dismissed today and said we can't have this sort of ad hoc legal approach, even under different circumstances, even in response to events like 9/11. The question then is, can we continue to guarantee a policy along those lines in a approach to this economic crisis? There are plenty of folks out there making the argument right now that on the bankruptcy side of things that we are taking as a country an ad hoc legal approach to solving Detroit's woes.
Well, I think the administration would probably concede the point that there's an ad hoc strategy to dealing with a series of economic issues. The president tries to thread them together by saying that he supports intervention that's limited in duration and that we can have an exit strategy and that sort of thing. But we all know that many of these are individual cases. AIG is nothing like what's going on with General Motors or with Chrysler and what's happening with major institutions on Wall Street. And so I think that's a very interesting parallel that you raised, Rebecca, and it's one that the administration is going to have to deal with for some time because they've got their fingers in a whole lot of pies right now, as you know.
Very interesting. By the way, I'm not sure. I think that Cheney himself may be unpopular, but I'm not sure that the arguments for waterboarding or other forms of intense interrogation are unpopular.
I think that's a good point. For the weak political hand that the Bush-Cheney administration was playing over the last couple of years, the strongest card in their hand was the issue of security. And in fact, when we looked at this periodically in our Wall Street Journal NBC polls, we did not find that a large proportion of the American people, or not a majority of the American people, felt that they had gone too far. So there's no question that Vice President Cheney is playing to important strains of public opinion with this argument.
And we don't want to go too far with this.